back, everyone. I'm Renee, and this is the Body and Mind Strong podcast, where we talk all things life, fitness, and health. And today we're going to talk about something that does come up from time to time with my clients, with couples, with parents, with people who are exhausted and can't quite figure out why. We're going to talk about family dynamics and specifically why the relationship between partners has to come first, especially when there are kids in the picture. Now, I know that might sound a little controversial. A lot of us grew up with the message that once you have children, they become the center of your attention. Their needs come first, their schedules come first, their happiness come first. And I get where that comes from. It comes from love. But I want to challenge that idea today because in my experience, both as a therapist and just as a human being watching what happens when there is unintentional neglect, prioritizing the couple's relationship isn't selfish. It's actually one of the most generous things you can do for your kids and for your marriage. Here's how I like to think about it. Picture a tree. The kids, they're the branches. They're the part everyone sees, the part that's growing and reaching and getting all the attention, and rightfully so. But none of that growth is possible without the trunk. The trunk is the couple's relationship. It's the solid, steady thing that everything else depends on. If the trunk is weak, cracked, neglected, doesn't matter how much energy you pour into the branches, eventually something has to give. And there's a second idea I want to plant right along the side with that one. And it's a phrase we have all heard. You can't pour into someone else's cup when your cup is empty. That's true for parenting, and it's especially true for partnership. When couples stop tending to each other, when the relationship becomes an afterthought behind work and kids and everything else, that emptiness doesn't just stay contained. It leaks into parenting, into the household, into the whole family system. So today we're going to talk about why this matters. I'll walk through some research on this, and we'll talk honestly about what tends to happen when the couple relationship gets pushed back to the back burner for too long. And then I've got a sample homework assignment for you all and your partner to stop putting into practice this week. So let's get into it. So let's start with the big one. Your relationship is the environment your kids grow up inside of. It's not separate from their development. It is part of their development. There's a well-known study out there of it's in the National Longitude Survey of Youth that followed families over time and looked at what predicted the best outcome for teens and young adults. And they looked at areas like both mental and physical health and even things like substance use. And yeah, of course, everything I'm going to reference today, I will put the links in the show notes. All right, with this study, the finding was pretty clear. Kids whose parents had a high-quality relationship with each other on top of a good relationship with the kids themselves constantly came out ahead. It's not one or the other, it's both. The couple's relationship and the parent-child relationship works together like two support beams holding up the same structure. When one of them is weak, the whole thing gets less stable. Now, there's another research that backs this up too, looking at marital quality across a full decade of a child's life, tracking things like anxiety, behavior, even academic performance, and found the same pattern. Kids are watching, they're absorbing way more than we give them credit for. And this brings me to the second big reason this matters. And it's one that I think a lot about as a woman, and probably a lot of you are listening to think about it as well. Your kids don't just learn what a relationship looks like by hearing you tell them how relationships should work. They learn it by watching you live it. This goes back to something called social learning theory from the psychologist Albert Bandura. The idea that kids build their internal blueprint for how relationships work by observing the adults closest to them. There's research specifically on this showing that the way parents tend to treat each other shape how the kids later approach their own romantic relationship, sometimes even decades down the road. So, the way you repair after an argument, the way you show affection, the way you speak to your partner when you're stressed, your kids are quietly filing all of that away as normal. And here's where it gets personal for a lot of us women. Girls in particular are watching how their mothers treat themselves. There's a study that looked at mothers and daughters and found something pretty striking. Mothers who showed high levels of self-sacrifice and self-neglect had daughters who showed those same patterns themselves. The daughters learned it. They watched their moms pour and pour and pour from an empty cup, and they absorbed that lesson that this is just what women do. You give until there's nothing left, and that's supposed to look like love. And I know I just quoted a research study on this, but I've actually seen this with my own clients. Okay. So I want you to really sit down with this question. If your daughter grew up and treated herself the exact same way you treat yourself right now, same amount of rest, same amount of self-neglect, same refusal to ask for help, would you be okay with that? A couple more questions. Would it be the life you would want for her? How would you want your daughter to treat herself? Because here's the thing. When we constantly put ourselves and our couple's relationship last, behind every school pickup, every practice, and every packed lunch, we're not just running ourselves into the ground. We are handing our daughters a script, and it's usually a script that leads to burnout, anxiety, and physical health problems down the road, because a body and a mind can only run on empty for so long before it starts to break down. So putting your relationship first and putting yourself in that equation at all isn't a selfish choice. It's actually one of the clearest, most loving lessons you can give to your kids, especially your daughters. You're showing them what a full cup looks like. You're showing them it's possible to love people well and still keep something for yourself. Now, if nothing else, that is the line I want you to take away from this episode. You can love people well, your family, your children, and still keep taking care of yourself and your partnership. Okay, so we've talked about why the trunk matters. Now let's talk about what happens when it doesn't get tended to, because I see this play out in my office more than anything else. Here's the pattern. A couple has kids. The kids' needs are loud and immediate. They need to be fed, driven, comfort, homework checked. The couple's needs are quiet. Nobody's crying because date night got skipped for the third month in a row. Nobody's melting down in the cereal aisle because you and your partner haven't actually had a conversation. Not a logistics conversation, but just an actual conversation in weeks. So the quiet thing keeps losing to the loud thing. Every single day, small choice by small choice. And slowly, without anyone deciding this on purpose, the couple's relationship gets demoted from partnership to co-management. You and your partner starts operating more like co-workers running a household business together than two people who chose each other. You're excellent at trading off school pickup, but you're strangers by the time you get 5 minutes alone on the couch. This is where the trunk starts to crack. And remember, branches don't get to keep growing just fine while the trunk is cracking underneath them. That's not how trees work, and it's not how families work either. So what actually happens? A few things, and I want to walk through them honestly. First, the emotional distance between partners tend to leak out sideways into the kids. Even when parents think they're hiding it well, kids are incredibly good at sensing tension, right? You guys have all seen this. And they're great at sensing like disconnection and resentment in the house. They may not be able to name it, but they can feel it in the atmosphere. And that unease can show up as anxiety, clinginess, acting out, or kids trying to manage the emotional temperament of the household themselves, which is a job that's never really supposed to be theirs, right? Second, resentment tends to build in the couple. When you never get to pour into that relationship, you start to feel like you're surviving your own life. A resentment doesn't stay contained to bedtime arguments about whose turn it is to do the dishes. It colors everything. It colors how patient you are with your kids. It colors how you talk to your partner in front of them. It colors whether home feels like a soft place to land or a place where everyone's little on edge. Third, and this is the one that really gets me, kids start absorbing a blueprint for relationship that isn't the one you'd actually choose for them. If what they watch day after day is two exhausted people who barely look at each other, who communicate mostly through logistic texts, who've quietly stopped choosing each other, that becomes their working definition of what a marriage or a partnership is. Not because you told them that's what it is, it's because you showed them. And for quite a few couples, this pattern doesn't resolve on its own. It just keeps compounding year after year until the kids grow up and leave the house and the couple looks at each other across the suddenly quiet home and realize they don't recognize the person that's over there. That's one of the most common stories I hear from couples in that empty nest season. It's heartbreaking because it's preventable. The trunk doesn't have to get that far gone. The good news is this is reversible at pretty much any stage. It requires small, consistent deposits back into the relationship, which is exactly what we're going to talk about next. So, If that's the pattern to watch out for, let's talk about the fix. And I promise it doesn't require a couple's retreat to Bali, which, I mean, honestly, that would be kind of nice, right? Or a complete life overhaul. It just requires a handful of small, consistent habits that keeps the trunk fed and strong. Here are the ones that I often discuss with my clients. The first, protect a standing time together and treat it like it's a non-negotiable. This could be a weekly date night, date breakfast, or a date lunch. It could be a Sunday morning coffee before the kids wake up, or even 20 minutes after bedtime with your phones in another room. The specific activity matters less than the fact that it's protected. Number 2, talk about something other than logistics. Most couples with kids default to what I call business meeting conversation. Who's picking up who? What's for dinner? Did the permission slip get signed? Necessary, but it's not a connection. Make space at least once a week to ask each other real questions like, how are you doing? What's been on your mind? What do you need from me this week? Number 3, repair quickly after conflict. You will not agree on everything, and that's fine. No couple does. What matters far more than avoiding conflict is how quickly you come back together after it. Don't let the tension sit for days. A short, genuine, I don't love how that went, can we try again, does more for your kid's sense of security than a household that never disagrees. Number 4, show affection in front of your kids. A hug in the kitchen, a hand on the shoulder, saying I love you out loud, telling each other what you are grateful for that the other one did. These are small, visible moments are doing real work. Not only does this add to the intimacy with your relationship with your partner, it shows your kids what warmth between partners actually look like, not just telling them it exists. Number 5, fill your own cup, not just each other's. Remember, you can't pour into your partner's or your kid's cup from an empty cup, right? Make sure you're getting something that's just for you. Exercise, a hobby, time with friends, quiet time alone. A relationship made of 2 depleted people can't sustain itself no matter how hard you try. Number 6, get support before you're in crisis. You don't have to wait until things are falling apart to see a couples counselor or even just read a good relationship book together. Think of it like maintenance on the trunk, not a repair you make only after it's already cracked. Actually, here's the metaphor I tend to use more often because I tend to work with a lot more men, right, in the military, right? So the one I use more often is think of it like changing the oil in your car. What happens when you don't change the oil, right? So changing the oil is like couples counseling. It's just maintenance. You guys think of all your strengths. You guys have a good foundation, but you're just fixing those little things to keep it maintained, to keep yourself going. All right, number 7, and this is the one I love the most because I love the looks I get when I ask a question. But okay, so number 7 is try and share a shower with no agenda. Yeah, this one might sound surprising, but it's actually one of the homework assignments I give to couples most often, and it tends to catch them off guard how much it actually helps. So the question is, I always loved asking this question is like, when's the last time you took a shower with your partner? And they just kind of give me this look and I'm like, okay, there's your homework assignment. And I've gotten so many different types of looks for this question. Okay, anyways, take a shower together. No phones, no kids interrupting, no to-do list running in the back of your mind. This doesn't need to lead to any physical intimacy at all. It is more of an emotional intimacy part. The point is something different. It's being physically present and unguarded with each other without any outside distraction pulling your attention away. There's something about that combination, undistracted, unclothed, no performance, nowhere to be, that tends to soften people. Couples often tell me it's where their most honest conversations happen, simply because for those 10 minutes, there's nothing else to compete for your attention, right? It's a small, low-pressure way to practice being fully present with each other again. Now, none of these are complicated, but consistency is what turns them from a nice idea into an actual root system holding your family steady. All right, let's move on to the homework assignment I'm going to give you guys. And this is what I give to all my clients that I work with. So remember tip number 2, where I talked about making space for conversation that goes beyond logistics? Here's how to actually put that into practice. This is a tool I call the weekly couples check-in, and it's a homework assignment I want you to try this week. Pick a consistent time, same day, same time each week works best. Usually at the beginning of the week I found tends to work definitely the best. So it becomes a natural rhythm than something you have to keep negotiating. 15 to 20 minutes is plenty. In fact, it could take anywhere from like a few minutes to like 30 minutes. It really just depends on you guys and what you have going on. And here's the structure. Start with the logistics. Get on the same page for the week ahead. Are there any schedules, appointments, who's handling what? Is there a date night planned, or is there a boys' night out, girls' night out? This is the part most couples already do, so it's a comfortable place to begin. Then shift into appreciation. Take turns sharing what went well over the past week that you both did well together, and something you genuinely appreciated that your partner did. It doesn't have to be big. It could be something like, I noticed you got up with the kids Saturday so I could keep sleeping in. That meant a lot. Then move into request. Each of you share one thing you would like from your partner going into the upcoming week. And here's the part that makes this different from just airing complaints. You follow it up with the question, what can I do for you in return? It keeps the exchange mutual instead of one-sided, and it turns, here's what I need, into a conversation instead of a demand. And basically, it turns me versus you to us versus the problem, right? So that's it. Logistics, appreciation, request, no more than like 15 minutes or so, once a week. Really, again, that's really up to you. What I love about this one is that it does double duty. It keeps the trunk of your relationship tended to, and it models something incredibly healthy for your kids if they ever catch a glimpse of it. Two people who check in with each other, say thank you out loud, and ask for what they need instead of letting resentment build in silence. Well, that's it for today's episode. If this one helped you realize something or helped you make a mind shift, I'd love to hear about it and share it with someone you think could use it too. And if this is something you're struggling with and you want to process it with a professional, reach out to me at www.bodyandmindstrong.com. Thanks for listening, and make sure you're doing at least one thing today that will get you one step closer to your goals. And don't let your mind get in the way of what you can achieve. Oh, one last thing. Be kind to yourself. You deserve it.